Something about that afternoon felt off from the start. The sky was too still, the kind of pale gray that made the sun feel distant, like it was thinking twice about shining. Jasmine Walker tugged at the sleeve of her school uniform as she stepped off the city bus, her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulder. She had just finished her shift volunteering at the community library, and all she wanted was a bag of hot Cheetos and some peace and quiet before tackling her mountain of homework. Her dad, Marcus, was working late at the auto shop, and her little brother was at a friend's house. The convenience store on the corner of Maple and 9th had always felt like a safe stop on the way home. Familiar, even. She pushed through the door of the small store, the bell chiming overhead. The scent of floor cleaner mixed with barbecue chips filled the air. Her sneakers squeaked slightly against the wax tile. Jasmine made her way past the magazine rack, pausing briefly to glance at a tabloid with some celebrity scandal on the cover. Then, as usual, she stopped at the candy aisle before grabbing a cold Sprite from the fridge in the back. She didn't see the eyes following her. The cashier, a young white woman named Becky, stood behind the counter, chewing gum and scrolling through her phone. Jasmine had seen her before. She never smiled, never made small talk. Today, she didn't even lift her head until Jasmine placed her items on the counter. That's when it started. Becky looked down, then back up at Jasmine, her expression hardening. "I'm gonna need to see your bag," she said flatly, not a question, an accusation. Jasmine blinked. "Excuse me?" Becky crossed her arms. "We saw you near the cosmetics section. Something's missing. Let me see your bag." The store was quiet, but now, the silence thickened into something heavy. A man near the beer fridge turned to look. Jasmine felt heat climb her neck. She hadn't even walked past the cosmetics aisle. "I didn't take anything," she said slowly. "I was just getting a drink and some chips." "Your bag," Becky snapped. "Open it." Jasmine hesitated, heart thudding in her chest. "Is there a manager I can talk to?" "I am the manager right now," Becky said, pulling a walkie-talkie from behind the register. "And if you don't show me your bag, I'm calling the cops." The words hit Jasmine like a punch to the stomach. She was 16, honors student, never in trouble a day in her life. But she could already feel the judgment in the air, the way her skin seemed to speak louder than her voice. She opened her bag with trembling hands, textbooks, a library receipt, her wallet, headphones. No lipstick. No mascara. Nothing that didn't belong to her. Becky peered in, squinting. "Where is it?" she muttered, more to herself than to Jasmine. Jasmine's voice wavered. "There's nothing in there. I told you." Before she could finish, the walkie crackled, and a man's voice came through. "You got her?" Becky nodded toward the door. "Bring the footage." That's when Jasmine saw him, a tall, stocky man in a gray hoodie, walking toward them from the back with a flash drive in hand. The store's assistant manager. He didn't look at Jasmine. Just plugged the drive into a monitor behind the counter. The screen flickered, then played grainy footage from 5 minutes earlier. "There," he said, pointing. On screen, Jasmine walked into the store. She moved past the aisle, paused near the drinks, and then, and this is where her breath caught, another girl entered the frame behind her. Same skin tone. Similar height. Wearing a black hoodie. That girl ducked near the cosmetics section, looked around, then quickly shoved something into her sleeve before bolting down a side aisle. "That's not me," Jasmine said, panic rising in her throat. "She's wearing black," Becky said, ignoring her. "You were wearing black earlier at school. I took off my hoodie before I came in. Look, this girl has braids." "I don't. That's not even my hair texture." They weren't listening. The assistant manager turned to Becky. "Should we call it in?" Becky nodded. "Yeah. We got enough." Jasmine stepped back. "Wait. Please don't. Just check the footage again. That girl left the store. I'm still here. That proves I'm not her. But the decision had already been made. Becky picked up the store phone, dialed with her long, pink-painted nails, and muttered into the receiver, "Yes, I'd like to report a theft. Yes, we've got the suspect here." Jasmine felt like she was shrinking inside herself, like every breath she took made her smaller. She wanted to scream, to make them understand, but instead, she stood frozen. Because she knew this story. She'd read it too many times, seen it in the news, in classroom discussions, in whispered conversations at family cookouts. Black girl. Store. Theft. Cops. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called the only number she could. Her dad answered on the second ring. "Jazz? What's wrong?" Her voice cracked. "They think I stole something. I didn't. I swear. They're calling the police." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." When he arrived 10 minutes later, he looked like a storm about to break. Tall, broad-shouldered, with oil-stained hands and eyes that burned with disbelief. He walked straight up to the counter. "Where is she?" he asked, voice low and even. Becky pointed, but this time, her confidence wavered. Marcus didn't even glance at her. He walked to Jasmine, pulled her into a hug, then turned to the assistant manager. "You got footage?" The man nodded. We already called the police." "Then I'll wait," Marcus said. "But while we do, play the whole thing. Start to finish. Show me when my daughter supposedly stole something." The footage rolled again, but this time Marcus leaned in. "Stop. Go back. Slower." They watched the girl in the black hoodie make her move, then disappear through aisle 7. "That girl left the store. My daughter's still here. That alone should tell you she's not the same person." Becky's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Marcus pulled out his phone. "You're going to email me this footage. And when the police get here, I'm going to show them exactly how quick y'all were to accuse the first black girl you saw." Sirens echoed outside. Jasmine stood beside her father, holding onto his sleeve. For the first time in what felt like forever, her hands stopped shaking. Later, as they sat in their car with the doors shut and the engine silent, Marcus turned to her. "You okay?" She looked out the window. "Not really." He nodded. "You don't have to be." She didn't say anything. She just let the quiet hold her, rocking gently like a wave that hadn't yet crashed. Somewhere deep inside her, something had shifted. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the first time she saw how fast people could twist the truth when it fit what they already believed. And in that moment, Jasmine Walker knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Long before anyone called her a thief, Jasmine Walker had mastered the art of silence. Not the fearful kind, but the kind that made you invisible. The kind that slipped through school hallways without drawing too much attention, that let you blend into the background when the world got too loud. Jasmine wasn't shy, at least not in the way teachers labeled her on report cards. She was observant. Quiet was where she listened, where she drew, where she figured people out. She'd been this way since she was little. Her mom used to call her, "our little owl," always watching with those wide, curious eyes. But her mother, Camilla, was now a memory wrapped in faded photo albums and Sunday morning stories. Jasmine was only 8 when she passed. Breast cancer, fast and mean. One minute Camilla was singing Erykah Badu in the kitchen, the next she was too tired to climb the stairs. After the funeral, Jasmine stopped drawing for months. She didn't know how to explain the hole inside her, so she didn't try. Her dad, Marcus, tried to keep life moving. He filled the silence with music, old jazz records, Miles and Coltrane, Ella Fitzgerald humming like a warm blanket through the apartment. He kept her fed, kept the lights on, worked overtime fixing engines at Wilson Auto. But the real work was in learning to hold his daughter's grief without dropping his own. Every night, he'd sit beside her bed and play a song on his saxophone. Sometimes, it was just a verse. Sometimes, the whole thing. He never asked her to talk. He just played. That was their language. Notes instead of words. And eventually, Jasmine picked up her pencil again. Her drawings grew with her. What started as cartoons in spiral notebooks turned into detailed sketches of faces, architecture, moments she saw on the L train. Art gave her control when life didn't. It became her way of telling the truth in a world that often refused to listen. By the time she turned 14, she was winning local art contests. At 15, her mural was chosen to hang in the front hallway of Roosevelt High. Everyone at school knew her name, if not for her voice, then for her work. She was the girl who drew stories. But being known didn't mean being seen. She knew how teachers sometimes lowered their expectations for black kids without even realizing it. She knew how white girls could laugh too loud in the hall and be called spirited, but if she did it, she was disruptive. She kept her head down. Played it safe. She did what every smart black girl learns to do by middle school, she became excellent in the hopes it would protect her. Still, no amount of straight A's or framed sketches could keep suspicion from creeping in when she stepped into certain spaces. Like Quick Mart. Like that cold fluorescent store where no one saw Jasmine Walker, the honor roll artist, daughter of a sax-playing widower, only a brown-skinned girl with a backpack and braided hair they didn't bother to notice wasn't hers. That night, after the incident, Jasmine couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of traffic and the distant clink of someone taking out trash across the alley. Her dad was in the kitchen, washing the same dish for the third time. She watched him from the hallway. His shoulders were tense. He hadn't said much since they got home. "Dad," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, baby. Did you believe me?" The question dropped into the air like a stone in water. Marcus set the plate in the drying rack, drying his hands on a faded towel. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "From the moment you called me. Before you even said a word." Jasmine nodded, but her lip trembled. "They didn't. No, they didn't. I didn't even raise my voice," she whispered. "I just froze." Marcus reached out, his hand warm on her knee. "You did exactly what you needed to do to stay safe. That's what matters. You're here. With me." Jasmine didn't cry often, but her eyes burned. "I feel dirty. Like the world sees something on me that I don't even see." Marcus stood and pulled her into a hug, holding her like she was 8 again and the world had broken her toy, or her heart. What they saw was their fear. Not your reflection. Their fear doesn't belong to you. After she went back to bed, Jasmine stared at the ceiling for hours. Her mind replayed the accusation, the looks, the way the police lights painted her reflection in the store window. She thought about what her mom would have said. Probably something soft but firm, the way Camilla used to correct people without ever raising her voice. Jasmine wished she had her mom's strength. But all she had was a sketchpad and a stubborn fire in her chest that refused to go out. At school the next day, things felt off. Word had gotten around. Not from her, but someone always talks. Whispers followed her through the hallways. She caught fragments. "I heard she got arrested, they said she got caught on camera, she doesn't look like she'd steal, though." Her best friend, Nia, met her at her locker. Nia was short, loud, brilliant in math, and fiercely loyal. "Tell me it ain't true." "It's not," Jasmine said. Nia gave her a look. "Then say less." "I got you." That was the thing about Nia. She didn't need the full story to have your back. She just needed to know your heart. Later that week, Jasmine sat in her favorite spot in the art room, by the window, where the light hit just right. She stared at a blank page. Usually, ideas spilled from her mind without hesitation. But now, every pencil stroke felt heavy, like the page might reject her. She closed her eyes and pictured her dad at the sink, washing dishes he didn't want to wash. She remembered his words, "Their fear doesn't belong to you." So she began to draw, not the girl who'd been accused, but the girl no one had seen. She drew herself standing tall in the store, surrounded by shadows and faces that blurred into judgment. She drew her own eyes, wide and calm, full of truth. Then she added her dad behind her, saxophone in hand, like a shield. She drew until the page spoke louder than the whispers. That night, Marcus came into her room holding something small. It was a USB drive. "I got a copy of the footage," he said. "From Lisa, the store manager. Turns out she was out of town when it happened. She saw it when she got back. She's the one who called me today." Jasmine sat up. "What did she say?" "She said she's sorry. That Becky was out of line. And that they're planning to issue a formal apology." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "They're scared of a lawsuit." "Probably," Marcus admitted. "But sometimes, scared people finally do the right thing. Doesn't make it okay, but it's a start." Jasmine turned the USB drive over in her hand. It was small, light. But it felt like something solid. Something that might be used to set the record straight. That night, as she lay in bed, Jasmine thought about what she wanted people to know, not just about the accusation, but about who she really was. She didn't want to be remembered as the girl they thought stole something. She wanted to be remembered as the girl who stood in truth and refused to disappear. Jasmine couldn't shake the weight of the accusation. It lingered in her mind like a shadow, following her everywhere. The whispers at school grew louder with each passing day. At lunch, she caught the girls in her homeroom eyeing her with quiet judgment, their conversations pausing the moment she walked by. It wasn't just the people who didn't know her, it was the ones who should have trusted her. Even Nia, who stood by her side every step of the way, seemed a little quieter these days. Jasmine could tell. They used to sit together after class, chatting about their futures, their plans, but now Nia's words were brief, distracted, as if she was trying to avoid the elephant in the room. "I don't want to talk about it," Jasmine said one day, sensing the shift. Nia looked at her with concern. "Jazz, it's not about talking about it. You know you can tell me anything, right?" "I know," Jasmine muttered, glancing at the table where they usually Saturday, "but it's not helping. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I need this to end." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Jasmine wasn't sure if she was challenging herself or Nia. She didn't want pity, and she certainly didn't want the people who once saw her as a quiet, serious girl to turn their backs now. Her reputation, built through years of hard work, the late nights drawing, the quiet hours spent perfecting every stroke, was being chipped away by a rumor she hadn't even created. It had been almost a week since the incident, and nothing had been resolved. The store manager, Lisa, had promised to help, but Jasmine hadn't heard anything from her. Instead, Becky, the assistant manager who had been the first to accuse her, kept showing up at school events with her perfect smile and fake concern. Jasmine couldn't stand it. "Hey," Nia said, breaking her from her thoughts. "I think we should go to the store tomorrow. If Lisa's got the footage, we can finally put this to rest. No more rumors. No more guessing. Just the truth." Jasmine hesitated. It was tempting. Part of her wanted to walk in there and confront Becky face to face, demand the truth, demand an apology. But another part of her was afraid of what the footage might show. What if the truth wasn't what she expected? What if it wasn't enough to clear her name? Before she could answer, the bell rang. She grabbed her books and stood up, feeling the familiar weight of the day on her shoulders. But as she walked out of the classroom, something inside her shifted. She had to know. The tension had been building for days, and she couldn't go on like this. She needed to find out what really happened. The next afternoon, she found herself standing in front of the Quickmart, her heartbeat thudding in her chest. Nia stood beside her, a steady presence, her arms crossed in front of her, eyes scanning the store through the glass. "Are you sure about this?" Nia asked quietly. Jasmine nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. "I don't have a choice anymore." As they pushed open the door, the familiar sound of jingling bells above their heads greeted them. Jasmine's stomach churned, but she tried to steady herself. The air inside was thick with the smell of packaged food and cleaning supplies. Lisa was behind the counter, sorting through receipts. When she saw them, her face softened. "Jasmine, Nia," Lisa said, her voice kind but strained. "I've been trying to get a hold of you. We need to talk." Jasmine's eyes darted to the security cameras in the corners of the store. "You have the footage?" Lisa nodded. "Yes, I do. I'm really sorry, Jasmine. I should have believed you sooner." Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to calm the wave of anger that was rising within her. "Can we see it?" Lisa hesitated for a moment but then nodded and led them to the small office in the back. The screen flickered to life as she plugged in the USB drive Marcus had given her. The footage started with a view of the aisle where Jasmine had been accused of stealing. Jasmine stared at the screen, waiting, holding her breath. There she was, Jasmine, walking through the aisles with her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at the shelves. But then, something strange happened. Becky, the assistant manager, appeared from behind the aisle, watching Jasmine with a suspicious look. Jasmine didn't even notice her at first. She continued looking at the snacks on the shelf, but then, suddenly, Becky rushed up and stopped in front of her. Jasmine's heart dropped. In the video, she could see the exact moment when Becky grabbed her arm and pulled her aside. The tension in the footage was palpable. Jasmine's mouth went dry. She watched herself respond, shaking her head in confusion, trying to explain. But Becky wasn't listening. She was pointing to Jasmine's bag, accusing her of taking something. "What is this?" Jasmine asked, watching herself speak in the video, her voice distant and calm. "I saw you put it in your bag," Becky responded, her voice tight with accusation. The video continued with Jasmine standing there, stunned, her hands still at her sides, not defending herself or even reaching into her bag. "She never took anything. There was nothing to find." Lisa paused the video, her eyes wide. "That's when I realized I had to do something. The footage doesn't lie, Jasmine. You were accused wrongfully." Jasmine clenched her fists. The weight of the truth was heavy in her chest. She had been wronged. She had been accused of something she hadn't done, and no one had listened to her. "I don't care about the apology," Jasmine said, her voice low but determined. "I just want everyone to know I didn't do it. That's all I care about." Nia stood beside her, silent for a moment, but then she spoke up. "We're going to make sure they know, Jazz. We'll talk to the principal, to the local paper, to anyone who'll listen. This isn't just about you. It's about showing people that we can't let things like this slide. Not anymore." Jasmine turned to face her best friend. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. The weight on her shoulders began to lift, and for the first time since the accusation, she felt like she could breathe again. But even as she felt that flicker of hope, the reality of what was to come settled in. They were up against more than just a misunderstanding. They were fighting a system that had already made up its mind about her. Becky had already accused her, and the damage was done. But Jasmine wasn't going to let it end this way. She wouldn't back down. And as she walked out of the store that day, the fire inside her burned brighter than ever. She wasn't just going to clear her name. She was going to make sure that no one else had to go through what she'd just endured. The days that followed felt like an endless stream of moments that, one by one, pushed Jasmine further into a corner. The truth was finally in her hands, but the real work was just beginning. Armed with the security footage and the support of Nia, Jasmine couldn't let herself slip into despair. But it wasn't going to be easy. The world didn't just stop spinning because you were right. It was a Saturday morning when Jasmine, with Nia by her side, sat in Principal Hugh's office. The white walls were as sterile as ever, the air thick with the kind of tension that seemed to hang in every room of this school. Principal Hughes sat behind his desk, his hands folded in front of him, looking down at a folder as if he hadn't already made up his mind. "Ms. Carter, Ms. Dawson," Principal Hughes said, looking up at them over the rim of his glasses. "I understand you brought some evidence to me today regarding the incident at Quickmart." Jasmine nodded, her fingers tight around the edges of the USB drive, her knuckles white. It was a small thing, but it was everything to her now. Everything she needed to prove the truth. "We have the footage," Nia said, her voice steady. "The security footage from the store. Jasmine didn't steal anything, and this proves it." The principal's expression was unreadable. He motioned for them to continue, and Nia slid the USB across the desk. With a sigh, Principal Hughes plugged it into his computer and clicked the mouse. The screen flickered for a second, and the footage from the store popped up, the same footage Jasmine had seen countless times since that day. But now, seeing it in the principal's office made it all too real. Her life had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and now she had to rely on this small piece of evidence to restore everything she had worked for. The footage played, showing Jasmine walking through the aisles at Quickmart, the camera capturing every move. Jasmine felt her breath catch in her throat as she watched herself on the screen. She knew the moment was coming. She knew what would happen next, but it still felt surreal. The moment when Becky had accused her of stealing. The moment when everything changed. Principal Hughes leaned back in his chair as the video continued. His eyes flicked between the screen and Jasmine's face, but he said nothing. Jasmine could feel the weight of his gaze, could feel him trying to make sense of the footage. But what was there to make sense of? She wasn't guilty. She was innocent. But as the video reached its conclusion, something shifted in Jasmine's chest. She wasn't angry anymore, she was determined. The tears she had cried earlier in the week seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a fire that refused to be put out. She wasn't going to let the truth slip away. Not again. Not ever. The silence in the room felt suffocating. Principal Hughes finally spoke, his voice slow and measured. "I'll need to speak with the staff at Quickmart," he said, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "And I'll need to make sure the security footage is genuine. This is serious, and we don't want to make any decisions in haste." Jasmine's heart sank. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. "But you saw it. You saw what happened," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "Becky lied. You know it. The footage proves it." "I'm not saying I don't believe you," Principal Hughes replied, his tone even, "but I need to follow protocol. I'll speak to the store manager, and then we'll go from there." Jasmine opened her mouth to protest, but Nia's hand on her arm stopped her. She looked at her best friend, who gave her a small nod. Jasmine took a deep breath and closed her eyes. It wasn't over. Not yet. She had come this far, and she couldn't give up now. "We'll be back tomorrow," Nia said, her voice strong. "You'll see. We're not giving up." Principal Hughes nodded. "I understand. But for now, let's allow time for the investigation." As they walked out of the office, Jasmine's mind raced. She felt the walls closing in. She had been so sure. But the truth was, she didn't know how long this fight would take. She didn't know if Principal Hughes would even help her. She didn't know if the truth would be enough to undo the damage. They made their way out of the school, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Jasmine felt like she was walking in a fog, every step heavy with uncertainty. She wanted to scream, to lash out at the world that had suddenly become so unfair. But instead, she turned to Nia, who was walking beside her in silence. "It's not enough," Jasmine muttered. Nia stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're right," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's not. But that's not going to stop us, is it?" Jasmine looked at her best friend, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Nia had always been there for her, even when things got tough. And now, when it seemed like the world was stacked against her, she wasn't going to give up either. "No," Jasmine said, her voice steady, even though her heart was still racing. "It's not enough. But it will be. We'll make them see the truth." As the two of them stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, Jasmine felt the weight on her shoulders lighten, if only for a moment. She wasn't fighting this battle alone. She had Nia. She had the footage. And no matter what came next, she wouldn't stop until she cleared her name. But as they walked toward the parking lot, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Becky had already accused her, and the damage was done. People had already believed the worst about her. The journey ahead was going to be long, and it wasn't going to be easy. Jasmine took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She was ready. Ready to face whatever came next. The next few days felt like a blur to Jasmine. She replayed every moment of the video in her mind, each frame etched into her memory. Her life had been reduced to this single incident, and nothing she did seemed to be enough to undo the damage. She kept waiting for something, anything. That would give her a sign that everything was going to be okay. But the longer she waited, the more the tension in her chest grew, like a pressure that threatened to suffocate her. It was Thursday morning when everything changed. Jasmine arrived at school early, her backpack heavier than usual, her thoughts clouded with worry. The halls were eerily quiet, the usual bustle of students getting ready for the day absent. She walked past the lockers, trying to keep her eyes forward, but it was impossible to ignore the whispers. Every time she passed a group of students, she could hear her name, Jasmine Carter, spoken in hushed tones, followed by laughter. Her stomach twisted into a knot. She had hoped that when she presented the footage to Principal Hughes, things would start to clear up. That her name would be cleared, that the truth would come out, and everything would be set right. But it wasn't happening. She felt like she was sinking deeper and deeper into quicksand. The harder she fought, the further she was pulled under. When the final bell rang, signaling the start of first period, Jasmine took a deep breath and pushed the door open to her history class. She slipped into her seat, keeping her head down, hoping to avoid the stares of her classmates. She wasn't ready for confrontation, not yet. But she couldn't hide forever. Mrs. Parker, the history teacher, was at the front of the class, organizing some papers on her desk. As soon as she saw Jasmine enter, her expression softened. The class was silent, and for a split second, Jasmine felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone believed her. But that hope quickly evaporated when Mrs. Parker's voice cut through the stillness. "Jasmine," she began, her tone tight. "I need to speak with you after class." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know if she was ready for another confrontation, another accusation. But she nodded, trying to keep the anxiety from showing on her face. The rest of the class passed by in a blur. Jasmine could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, but she refused to look up. Her thoughts were consumed with what Mrs. Parker might say. Was it the principal? Had something gone wrong with the footage? Had Becky said something else? Finally, the bell rang, and the students rushed out, leaving Jasmine behind in her seat. She stood, hesitating for a moment before walking toward Mrs. Parker's desk. The teacher looked up, her face unreadable. "Jasmine," Mrs. Parker began again, her voice softer now, as if she were choosing her words carefully. I just wanted to let you know that I've spoken with Principal Hughes, and I've also seen the footage. She paused, her gaze dropping to the desk. I have to admit, I was skeptical at first. But I believe you. I truly do. Jasmine felt a surge of relief flood through her, but it was short-lived. Mrs. Parker's next words cut through her like a knife. But there's something else, she continued, her voice strained. The footage alone isn't enough to clear you. You need something more, something that proves it was intentional, that you weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Without that, we can't guarantee that people will believe you. Jasmine's chest tightened again. What are you saying? Her voice was barely a whisper, her hands shaking at her sides. Mrs. Parker hesitated, as though weighing the consequences of what she was about to say. I'm saying that there's still a chance you could be suspended, even with the footage. The administration is under a lot of pressure from the store. They want to make sure everything's handled properly. And if Becky's word is taken over yours. Mrs. Parker's voice trailed off, and Jasmine felt the full weight of her words crash down on her. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just have the footage. It wasn't enough to just tell the truth. Jasmine had been living under the assumption that once the video was shown, everything would fall into place. But now, the reality was clearer, she needed more than just evidence. She needed a miracle. Tears stung her eyes, and she clenched her fists to keep them from spilling over. But there was no room for tears now. Not anymore. I understand, Jasmine finally said, her voice tight. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. As she turned to leave, she saw a shadow in the doorway. It was Becky. The moment their eyes met, Jasmine's heart raced. Becky's smile was wide, almost too wide, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. The girl stepped into the room, her presence filling the space like a dark cloud. It didn't take much for Jasmine to feel the hostility radiating from her. Jasmine felt a wave of nausea sweep over her, but she refused to let Becky see how much she had been shaken. She wasn't going to let Becky win, not now, not ever. Becky didn't say anything, but the look she gave Jasmine spoke volumes. She didn't need to. Her confidence was so obvious that it almost made Jasmine sick. She had won, in Becky's eyes. The battle was over, and Jasmine had lost. But Jasmine wasn't going to let Becky have the final word. She stormed out of the classroom, pushing past Becky, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what to do next, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let Becky control her life any longer. She had to find a way to make the truth known, no matter what it took. As Jasmine walked down the hallway, Nia caught up with her. The concern on her best friend's face was palpable, but there was no time to explain. We need to go to the store, Jasmine said, her voice determined. It's the only way. We need to find something, anything, that will prove I didn't do this. Nia nodded without hesitation. Let's go. We'll figure this out together. As they left the school, Jasmine's mind was already spinning with plans, each one more desperate than the last. But there was something inside of her, a spark, that refused to go out. She wasn't going to give up. Not now, not after everything she had already been through. This was just the beginning of the fight. Jasmine's feet felt like they were dragging as she walked to the local convenience store. Nia was by her side, trying to keep up with her brisk pace. Every step felt heavy, but Jasmine wasn't going to stop. She couldn't. The walls of her life were closing in around her, and the only way out was to face the challenge head-on. They reached the store, its neon sign flickering in the early evening light. Inside, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, illuminating rows of snacks, cold drinks, and cleaning supplies. But it wasn't the brightly lit shelves Jasmine was focused on, it was the security desk at the far end of the store. That's where the footage had been saved, where the truth was locked behind layers of technology and store policy. I can't believe we're doing this, Nia said, breaking the silence as they approached the counter. "You know the manager's probably going to give us a hard time, right?" "I know," Jasmine replied, her voice steady but her heart pounding in her chest. "But we need that footage. We need more than what we already have to make people believe me." They walked up to the counter, where a middle-aged man with a graying beard stood behind the register, tapping away at his phone. Jasmine hesitated, but Nia gave her a reassuring nudge. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, her voice clear but unsure. "I'm looking for the manager. I need to talk to him about something important." The man looked up from his phone, his brow furrowing. "The manager's not here right now. You can leave a message, or come back tomorrow." Jasmine's stomach churned, but she wasn't giving up that easily. "No," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I need to talk to him now. It's about the security footage from last week." She paused, her throat tightening. "I'm the one who was accused of stealing. I just need to show something that proves I didn't do it." The man's expression softened slightly, but his eyes still held an air of skepticism. "Kid, I don't know what you're talking about. There's a process for all that. You can't just ask for footage out of nowhere." Jasmine felt a wave of frustration rising, but Nia was quick to step in. "We know what we're asking, sir. It's important. We just want to clear up a misunderstanding. If you could just let us speak to someone who can help us, we'll be out of your hair." There was a long silence, and for a moment, Jasmine thought they might be sent away empty-handed. But then the man sighed and stood up. "Fine. Wait here." Jasmine and Nia exchanged a glance, both holding their breath as the man disappeared into the back room. Jasmine's palms were slick with sweat, her heart racing. Would they really be able to get the footage? Would it be enough to clear her name? A few tense minutes passed, and then the man returned with a young woman in tow, probably in her late 20s, wearing a store uniform and holding a set of keys. "I'm Sandra," the woman said with a polite smile. "I'm the assistant manager here. What seems to be the problem?" Jasmine took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've been wrongly accused of stealing something from the store," she began. "I know it sounds strange, but I have proof that I didn't take anything. I need to see the security footage from last week." Sandra raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the request. "That's a big ask. Security footage isn't just handed out to anyone. There's a process, Anne." "I understand," Jasmine interrupted, her voice firm. "But I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for justice. I have been slandered, and I just need to prove that I didn't do what they're saying." Sandra hesitated, looking between Jasmine and Nia. The silence stretched on for a moment before she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll help you. But you'll have to follow the proper procedure, and we'll need to contact the district manager to approve it." Jasmine felt a rush of relief, though she knew there was still much more to be done. She was closer than she had been in days, but it wasn't over yet. "Thank you," Jasmine said quietly. Sandra motioned for them to follow her as she led them to the back office. "We'll get the footage, but I'll need you to sign some forms. If everything checks out, you can view the footage on the system in the next room." Jasmine followed Sandra, feeling a flicker of hope ignite in her chest. There was a chance. She was so close. After signing several forms, Sandra walked over to a computer and began typing away. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jasmine couldn't help but feel like she was standing on the edge of something big. Nia stood by her side, offering a quiet smile of encouragement. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sandra clicked a button, and the screen came to life. Jasmine's eyes locked onto the footage, her breath catching in her throat. There she was, standing by the aisles, reaching for a bottle of juice. The camera angle was clear, and Jasmine could see everything happening with perfect clarity. She watched as the moments from the store replayed in front of her. She saw Becky walking by her, looking directly at the bottle she was holding. Jasmine's fingers tightened on the edge of the desk as she watched the footage unfold. But it was what came next that sent a chill down her spine. The footage clearly showed Becky's hand reaching out, moving the bottle from Jasmine's hand into her own basket. Then, Becky quickly walked away, casting a look over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. Jasmine could hardly breathe. There it was. The moment she had been waiting for. It wasn't her who had stolen the bottle, it was Becky. The truth was right there in front of her. Do you see it? Nia whispered beside her. That's it, Jasmine. That's the proof. Jasmine nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The truth was finally revealed. But there was one more thing she needed to do, she needed to show this to the world. As they left the store, Sandra promised to help them share the footage with the right authorities, but Jasmine knew that the hardest part was still ahead of her. She had the evidence now, but she had to find a way to get people to listen. Jasmine glanced at Nia, her mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. It wasn't over yet. But as they walked into the fading sunlight, Jasmine felt a sense of calm for the first time in days. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. And no matter what came next, she knew she had the strength to keep going. The truth had come to light. And Jasmine was ready to fight for it. The day after Jasmine had seen the security footage, she couldn't shake the feeling of both relief and anxiety. It had felt like a weight had been lifted from her chest when the truth about Becky's deceit came to light, but the journey was far from over. The hardest part was still ahead, making sure everyone knew the truth, clearing her name once and for all. Jasmine felt the heavy burden of that responsibility weighing on her. The sun was just beginning to set as Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Nia was sitting across from her, sipping on a cup of tea, trying to hide the concerned look on her face. Jasmine had barely spoken all day, lost in her thoughts as the reality of everything started to sink in. She had proof, but would anyone believe her? I know you're probably scared, Nia said, breaking the silence. But you're not alone in this. You've got the footage. People are going to see it, Jasmine. They'll understand. Jasmine looked up from her phone, her eyes weary but determined. It's not just about proving I didn't steal. It's about getting my life back, Nia. What if this damage is too deep? What if people still see me as a thief? What if they don't care? Nia's expression softened. People will care. You've got to trust in the truth. Not everyone's going to turn their backs on you, Jasmine. The people who matter, the ones who know you, they'll support you. And you have the truth on your side. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to steady the swirl of emotions inside her. She appreciated Nia's support, but a nagging doubt still clung to her. She had faced the judgment of her peers, the harsh whispers and sideways glances. The fallout from this incident would take time to heal, and part of her was terrified that it might never truly go away. As the evening wore on, Jasmine finally mustered the strength to call her dad. She had to tell him everything, the footage, the truth, and her next steps. It felt like the right thing to do, even though she feared how he might react. She knew he was always looking out for her, but this time, the situation was different. This was bigger than anything they had dealt with before. The phone rang for a moment before her father picked up. Jasmine? How are you, baby? She felt a wave of comfort hearing his voice. It was like a steady anchor in the midst of the storm. Dad, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, I've got the footage. I didn't steal anything. It was Becky. I have proof now. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Jasmine could practically hear her father processing the information. Wait, you've got proof? He asked, his voice filled with both surprise and concern. Yes, Dad. The store has the security footage, and it shows Becky taking the bottle when I wasn't looking. I didn't do anything wrong. Jasmine, that's incredible. I'm proud of you for sticking through it. But what are you going to do now? This isn't going to be easy. People won't just forget what they thought happened. Jasmine's heart sank at his words. He was right. The road ahead was going to be difficult, and even with the footage, she couldn't predict how people would react. But she had come this far, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. I'm going to show it, Jasmine said, the determination returning to her voice. I'm going to show the footage to the authorities. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to make sure Becky doesn't get away with it. Her father was quiet for a moment, then his voice softened. That's my girl. I believe in you. But make sure you've got everything lined up. This isn't just about clearing your name. You need to be prepared for the fallout. People are going to question you, Jasmine. Be ready for that. Jasmine closed her eyes, listening to her father's words. She knew he was right. He always had a way of putting things into perspective, of reminding her of her strength even when she felt weak. I will, Dad. I've got Nia, and I've got the truth. That's all I need. After the call ended, Jasmine sat back in her chair, a feeling of resolve beginning to grow inside her. She couldn't keep running from the situation. She had been wronged, and it was time to take action. The next day, Jasmine walked into the local police station, her heart pounding in her chest. Nia was by her side, offering silent support. Jasmine had decided that it was time to bring the footage to the authorities. She knew there would be questions, but she couldn't keep hiding. She had to face this head-on. The officer behind the counter, a woman with dark hair tied into a neat bun, looked up as they approached. Can I help you? Jasmine took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. Yes, I need to file a report about an accusation. I was falsely accused of stealing something, and I have proof that I didn't do it. I'd like to show the footage to someone in charge. The officer looked skeptical at first but then gestured for them to follow her. All right. Let's take a look. They were led into an office where another officer, a man in his 30s, was sitting at a desk. He looked up as they entered, his expression curious but guarded. Hello, the officer said. How can I help you today? Jasmine's voice wavered, but she held her ground. I've been accused of stealing from a store, and I have the security footage that shows I didn't do it. I'd like to file a report and show you the evidence. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the request. Security footage, huh? Okay, let's see what you've got. Jasmine handed over her phone, where the video was saved. The officer took it with a skeptical glance and began watching. The silence in the room was thick as the footage played. Jasmine watched him carefully, her heart racing. She couldn't afford any mistakes now. After a few minutes, the officer finally looked up, his expression shifting. Okay, this is something. But we'll need to verify this with the store. We'll get back to you. Jasmine nodded, but she didn't feel the relief she thought she would. This wasn't over yet. There were still hurdles to jump, still battles to fight. But now she had the proof. She had something to stand on. As they left the police station, Nia turned to her, a proud smile on her face. You did it, Jasmine. You took the first step. Jasmine felt a small spark of hope deep inside her. She hadn't won yet, but she was finally moving forward. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. She was going to fight for her name, for her future. The truth would win, she believed that. And with every step she took, she knew she was getting closer to the life she deserved. The days that followed Jasmine's visit to the police station felt like a blur. She spent her time waiting for updates, her mind constantly racing with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. Every phone call she received, every knock on the door, made her heart skip a beat. What if the footage wasn't enough? What if the people who had already judged her wouldn't believe the truth? It was Friday afternoon when the call came. Jasmine was sitting in her room, her phone resting on the table in front of her. Nia had just left for a meeting, and Jasmine was once again alone with her thoughts. The silence in the house was almost suffocating. When her phone buzzed, she reached for it instinctively, her pulse quickening as she saw the name on the screen, Officer Harris. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine answered the call. "Hello. Jasmine, this is Officer Harris. We've reviewed the footage, and we've confirmed that you were not involved in the theft. Becky has been arrested, and she's admitted to taking the bottle. We're preparing a formal report." Jasmine's heart surged with relief, but it was quickly followed by a wave of disbelief. She had spent so many days carrying the weight of the accusation, and now the truth was finally coming to light. "Becky admitted it?" Jasmine whispered, still trying to process the words. "Yes, she did. She was caught in the store's security footage, and when we confronted her, she confessed. She tried to frame you to cover up her actions." The tension in Jasmine's shoulders melted away as she let out a shaky breath. "Thank you, Officer Harris. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much this means to me. I'm glad we could help, Jasmine. We'll keep you updated on any further developments. You can come down to the station if you'd like to review the official report once it's finalized." Jasmine hung up the phone, her hand still trembling slightly. It was over. The truth had won, but a lingering question remained: what now? She had gotten her name back, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her life would never be the same. Later that evening, Jasmine and Nia sat together on the porch, sipping iced tea as the sun dipped low in the sky. The weight of the past week still lingered, but now it was accompanied by a quiet sense of triumph. "You did it, Jasmine," Nia said, her voice full of pride. "You held your ground, even when it felt impossible." Jasmine nodded, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Yeah, but I'm still not sure what to do next. It's like I've been living in this constant state of fear and doubt, and now that it's over, I don't know how to move forward. I don't know who I am after all this." Nia looked at her for a long moment, her expression soft and understanding. "You're still the same Jasmine, the girl who's been strong all this time. This is just a chapter, not your whole story. But it feels like everything's changed," Jasmine admitted. "People still talk about what happened. Even if they believe me, I'll always be the girl who was accused. How do I ever move past that?" Nia reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to forget what happened, Jasmine. But you can choose how it defines you. You've got a chance to show people who you really are now. And you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who love you, people who believe in you." Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to let the weight of Nia's words sink in. She knew Nia was right. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new. But the thought of facing the world again, knowing that some people would never fully understand, still weighed heavily on her. Jasmine had always been strong, but the journey ahead seemed more daunting now than ever before. The next day, Jasmine decided to take the first step in reclaiming her life. She walked down to the local cafe, where she had spent countless afternoons with her friends, but things had changed. The whispers, the looks, the questions, it all felt like a constant reminder of what she had been through. As she walked inside, her eyes scanned the room, searching for familiar faces. She spotted a few of her classmates, sitting in a corner booth, and for a moment, her heart skipped a beat. Would they look at her differently? Would they still see her as the thief? Taking a deep breath, Jasmine walked over to their table, where her friend Mia was sitting with two others. Mia looked up and smiled, but the smile faded slightly when she saw Jasmine. "Hey, Jasmine," Mia said, her tone unsure. "How are you doing?" Jasmine forced a smile. "I'm okay. I wanted to talk to you guys. I know there's been a lot of talk about what happened, and I just want to make sure you all know the truth." Mia nodded slowly. "We do know, Jasmine. We heard the news. Becky confessed, right?" "Yeah, she did," Jasmine replied, her voice steadying as she spoke. I just wanted to make sure you knew I didn't do anything wrong. I know a lot of people were quick to judge me, but I never stole anything. I hope you guys can understand that." Mia exchanged a glance with the others before speaking. "We do understand, Jasmine. We should have known better. We let the rumors get to us, and for that, I'm sorry." Jasmine felt a weight lift off her chest. It wasn't easy, but she was starting to feel like she was regaining control. "Thank you, Mia. I appreciate it." The conversation shifted, and Jasmine found herself easing into the familiar rhythms of her friendship again. There was still some awkwardness, some hesitations, but it was a start. The past week had been incredibly painful, but it had also shown her who truly cared, who would stand by her no matter what. That afternoon, Jasmine left the cafe with a sense of cautious optimism. The truth had come out, and the road ahead still had many challenges. But she wasn't backing down anymore. She wasn't going to let the past define her. For the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt a flicker of hope. Hope that she could rebuild, hope that her future was still hers to shape. Jasmine woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window, a sound she had always found soothing, but today it felt different. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft rays across her room. It was a new day, but one that felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. Her life, while still normal in some ways, had been irrevocably changed over the past few weeks. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. The security footage had cleared her name, but that didn't mean everything was okay. Sure, the accusation of theft was behind her, but the ripples of doubt and gossip still lingered. Jasmine knew that people were whispering, making assumptions, and it stung more than she'd like to admit. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from her thoughts. She reached for it, half expecting another call from Officer Harris or one of her friends. Instead, it was a message from her mom. "Hey baby, I'm thinking of you today. I know things have been tough, but remember, this too shall pass. I'm proud of you. Call me when you can." Jasmine smiled, feeling a small weight lift off her shoulders. Her mom's unwavering support had been a constant throughout this ordeal. No matter how hard things got, she had always been there, offering love and guidance. It was a reminder that even when the world seemed to be crumbling, there was always someone who believed in her. With a deep breath, Jasmine stood up, stretching her arms above her head. She had spent the last few days recovering, but it was time to move forward. There was work to be done, both on the outside and within herself. It wasn't just about clearing her name anymore, it was about reclaiming her sense of self. That afternoon, Jasmine decided to take a walk through the park, something she hadn't done in what felt like forever. The familiar scent of fresh grass and the sound of children playing brought her some comfort as she strolled along the path, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She needed time to think, time to process everything that had happened. As she walked, she noticed a small group of kids gathered near the playground, their laughter filling the air. Jasmine paused for a moment, watching them. A memory surfaced. One of her younger brother, Theo, running around this very park, his infectious laughter echoing in her ears. She smiled, but the moment of nostalgia was short-lived. It reminded her of all the things she had missed in the chaos of the past few weeks. Her family, her friends, her sense of normalcy. But today, in this moment, she had the opportunity to find it again. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw someone she didn't expect, Becky, standing by the swings, alone. The sight of her brought a rush of mixed emotions. Jasmine felt a sharp pang of anger, followed by an almost overwhelming sense of pity. Becky had done this to her, had stolen not just a bottle of perfume, but her peace of mind, her sense of trust in the people around her. Jasmine felt the urge to confront her right then and there, but she paused. Something about the way Becky stood there, her shoulders slumped, made her reconsider. Was Becky really the villain in all of this? Or had she been driven to make terrible choices by her own insecurities, by the pressure of her own life? After a few moments, Jasmine made up her mind. She walked over to the swings, stopping just a few feet away from Becky. "Hey," Jasmine said, her voice steady, though there was a tightness in her chest. Becky looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at Jasmine as if she couldn't believe she was actually standing there. For a moment, the silence stretched between them, awkward and tense. Jasmine took a deep breath. "I just want to say something, and I need you to hear me out, okay?" Becky nodded hesitantly. "I'm not mad at you," Jasmine began, her words coming out slower than she expected. "I'm hurt, yes. But I'm not mad. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're lost. And I understand that. I've been there. I've been in a place where I was so desperate to fit in, to be accepted, that I did things I wasn't proud of." Becky's eyes welled up, and she quickly wiped away a tear. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to protect myself. But I see now how wrong I was." Jasmine's heart softened. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet. But it was about understanding. And sometimes, that was all people needed, a little bit of empathy. "I know," Jasmine said, her voice gentle. "But you have to understand, Becky, that actions have consequences. And the consequences of what you did went way beyond me. It hurt people who cared about both of us. People who trusted you." Becky nodded, her face crumpling as she fought back tears. "I know. And I hate myself for it. I wish I could take it back." There was a long silence, but this time it was different. Jasmine wasn't holding on to her anger anymore. She wasn't trying to seek retribution or make Becky feel worse. She was simply speaking her truth. "I'm not saying we're going to be best friends," Jasmine continued. "But I hope that, one day, you can find a way to make things right, not just with me, but with yourself." Becky nodded again, her voice small but sincere. "I will. I promise." Jasmine didn't expect an instant change, and she wasn't looking for an apology to erase the hurt. But in that moment, she felt like a weight had been lifted. She didn't need to carry around the bitterness anymore. Letting go didn't mean excusing what had happened, but it meant freeing herself from the anger that had consumed her for so long. As she turned to walk away, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about reclaiming her own peace, about accepting that healing was a process, and that it took time. And for the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt a small spark of hope for the future. The days that followed felt like a breath of fresh air, a change in the wind. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jasmine didn't wake up with the weight of fear and doubt pressing against her chest. She could go about her day without feeling like the world was conspiring against her. Even the soft rustle of leaves outside her window seemed to whisper a message of renewal. It was a strange feeling. Healing was never linear, she knew that. The scar of the accusation still lingered, but there was something else now, a lightness, a spark of possibility. She wasn't quite sure what it was yet, but she could feel it, like the first hint of dawn breaking through the darkness. Jasmine spent that morning sitting in her favorite spot by the window, a notebook open in front of her. She didn't write much, not yet. But she sketched out a few lines. Ideas, memories, a jumble of thoughts she couldn't quite organize. But one thing was clear, she wanted to reclaim herself, to rebuild the pieces of her life that had felt shattered. The confrontation with Becky had been a turning point. In their brief conversation, Jasmine had realized that she wasn't just letting go of the anger. She was letting go of the need for closure that didn't come on her own terms. Sometimes, people didn't apologize the way you wanted them to, and sometimes they couldn't. But that didn't mean you had to stay trapped in their mistakes. There was power in that realization, power in owning her story. That afternoon, Jasmine decided to take a trip to the community center. She hadn't been there in a while, but it was a place that had always felt like home. The center wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of everything she had once felt connected to. The after-school programs, the dance classes, the volunteer work, and most importantly, the people who had always been there to support her. As she stepped inside the familiar doors, the warmth of the space enveloped her. The hum of activity filled the air. Laughter, the tap of shoes on the floor, and the voices of people coming together. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and you couldn't walk a few feet without seeing a friendly face. She found Ms. Taylor, the community center coordinator, in her office, sorting through paperwork. Ms. Taylor looked up when she entered, her face breaking into a smile. "Well, if it isn't the one and only Jasmine," she said warmly. "How are you doing, dear?" Jasmine smiled back, feeling the comfort of her presence. "I'm doing okay. Better, actually." "I'm glad to hear that," Ms. Taylor replied. "What brings you here today?" "I was hoping to help out again. If there's anything that needs doing, I'd love to get back into the swing of things." Ms. Taylor raised an eyebrow in surprise. "That's wonderful to hear. We can always use an extra hand, especially now that the summer programs are about to kick off. I'll put you to work, don't you worry." Jasmine felt a flood of relief. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but hearing Ms. Taylor's enthusiastic response made her feel like she was stepping back into something solid, something familiar. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't defined by the incident. She was defined by who she was, someone who cared, someone who wanted to make a difference. The next few days were filled with organizing supplies, preparing for the summer events, and reconnecting with old friends and mentors. It felt like a slow but steady rebuilding. With every box she moved, every poster she hung, every laugh shared with the kids who came in and out of the center, Jasmine felt more like herself. She wasn't just the girl who had been falsely accused of theft. She was a part of something bigger than herself. But there was more she had to confront. The guilt, the weight of what she had almost lost, lingered at the back of her mind. It wasn't just about what had happened with Becky, it was about the fear of being judged, of not being trusted, of never being fully seen for who she was. That night, as she sat at her desk and tried to focus on her homework, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her dad. "Hey kiddo, can you meet me for dinner tomorrow? I want to talk about something." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Her dad had been her rock throughout everything. He had always been the steady force in her life, the one who made sure she felt supported no matter what. But there had been something in his tone lately that made her wonder what was going on. The next evening, Jasmine found herself sitting across from her dad at their favorite diner, the familiar smell of burgers and fries filling the air. Her dad smiled at her, but there was something serious in his eyes. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. "Jasmine, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," he began. "And I want to make sure you're okay. I know this whole thing with the theft accusation hit you harder than you let on. But I also know you're strong. And I'm proud of how you've handled things." Jasmine nodded, her throat tightening. She hadn't expected him to bring it up so directly. "I'm getting there," she said quietly. "I'm trying to. But it's been hard. It's like there's always this shadow hanging over me, and no matter what I do, it feels like people are still whispering." Her dad reached across the table and placed his hand on hers. "I get it. And you're right, it's not just about what happened with Becky. It's about how people see you after something like that. But I want you to know something, no one can define you, Jasmine. Not them. Not the rumors. Not the past." Jasmine felt a lump in her throat. Her dad always knew how to make her feel like she could do anything. "Thanks, Dad. I really needed to hear that." But then, his expression changed, and his voice softened. "There's something else I need to show you. Something I've been holding on to for a while now." Jasmine frowned, confused. "What is it?" Her dad took out his phone and pulled up a video. This is from the day of the incident. The security footage from the store. I never showed it to anyone because I didn't want to make things harder for you. But I think it's time you saw it. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. The footage. The one thing that could prove she was innocent. But why had her dad kept it from her all this time? He pressed play. The video played on her dad's phone, and Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. The footage was grainy, the edges blurry with age, but it was clear enough to make her pulse race. She watched as the security camera captured the scene from the store, the same store where everything had gone wrong just weeks ago. She saw herself, walking down the aisle, her hand brushing over the shelves of snacks, as she always did when she shopped. But then, there it was. A blur. Another figure coming up behind her, a person who clearly slipped something into their bag while Jasmine was distracted, looking at the display on the opposite shelf. The person, someone she didn't even recognize, quickly turned and made their way to the exit, the camera following them for a few brief seconds before they disappeared out of sight. Jasmine's hands trembled as the video continued. She felt her stomach twist with a mix of disbelief and a strange, hollow sense of validation. I wasn't the one who took it, she whispered, almost to herself. She had always known, deep down, that she hadn't stolen anything. But seeing the truth unfold in front of her, so clearly, so undeniably, was another thing entirely. Her father watched her closely as she processed the scene, the silence hanging between them. Finally, Jasmine looked up at him, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Why didn't you show me this before? Why wait until now? Her dad sighed, a deep, heavy sound, and leaned back in his chair. I didn't want to make it harder on you. I didn't want to add to the chaos. I thought you were handling things, that you'd get through it on your own, without having to see the footage. I didn't want you to relive the moment you were blamed, to see the person who set you up. Jasmine blinked, her mind racing with the new information. The truth was right there, but now a whole new set of questions filled her head. But why didn't anyone else see this? Why didn't anyone check the cameras at the time? The manager, they should have done something. Her dad shook his head, a frown creasing his face. Because, Jasmine, people make assumptions. And in those moments, assumptions are easier than seeking the truth. The store manager, the employees, they saw you standing near the aisle, and they just assumed. No one stopped to think that maybe you were just caught up in the chaos of it all. But that doesn't make it right, Jasmine said, her voice rising with frustration. I shouldn't have had to be the one to prove myself. Everyone should have just believed me. Her father's expression softened. I know, baby. I know. But sometimes, people don't see what's right in front of them. They jump to conclusions, especially when they're dealing with things like theft or dishonesty. The problem wasn't you, it was their perception. Jasmine absorbed his words, but the sting of the past few weeks still gnawed at her. It wasn't just the accusation that had hurt her. It was the fact that, for a while, she had felt like she was the problem. The label they had given her, the thief, had followed her like a shadow, overshadowing everything she did. It had been hard to feel anything other than shame, no matter how many times her father had told her she was innocent. But now, seeing the truth, seeing that she wasn't the one to blame, something began to shift within her. The anger, the bitterness, the frustration that had been building up, they didn't disappear entirely, but they started to fade, to lose their grip on her. Her dad watched her closely. This isn't about revenge, Jasmine. I didn't show you this video to make you angry or to get back at anyone. It's about you understanding your own worth. You are not what they accused you of. You're stronger than that. And it's time you started seeing yourself that way. Jasmine nodded slowly, her heart still heavy but a little lighter than before. I get it. I know I'm not a thief. But it's hard to shake the feeling, you know. To just move on from it. I know it is, her dad said gently. And it's going to take time. But this is your story, Jasmine. And you get to decide how it ends. No one else can write it for you. Jasmine took a deep breath, the weight of everything beginning to settle in. Her father had always been her rock, the steady presence in her life. But hearing him say those words now, it was like a door had opened inside her, one she didn't even know had been closed. The truth, as painful as it was out there. The accusations, the whispers, the looks, it wasn't her fault. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to keep carrying the burden of them. Maybe it was time to let go. As she sat there, processing everything, her dad reached over and squeezed her hand. I don't want you to think you have to figure all this out alone, Jasmine. You've got a whole team behind you. You have me, and you have the people who know the truth. And we're not going anywhere. Jasmine smiled at him, the corners of her mouth twitching despite the tears that threatened to fall. Thanks, Dad, she whispered. I'm going to be okay. Her dad gave her a small, knowing smile. I know you will. You've always been okay. This is just another chapter. And you're stronger than any chapter you've faced before. But even as he said that, Jasmine wasn't so sure. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The fallout from the accusation, from the damage done to her reputation, would take time to heal. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, or how long it would take for her to fully step away from the shadow of those lies. But one thing was clear, the truth had set her on a new path, one where she could finally start to heal. As they finished their dinner, her mind still swirling with the revelation, Jasmine felt a tiny spark of hope begin to flicker deep inside her. It wasn't much yet, but it was enough to remind her that, even in the darkest moments, there was always the possibility of something better. And for the first time in weeks, Jasmine felt like she might just be able to take the next step forward. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jasmine woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity. The events of the previous day still hung in the air, but now there was a shift. The truth had been laid bare in front of her, and with it came the first real sense of peace she'd had in weeks. But peace was only one part of the equation. There was still so much work to be done. The community still believed the lie. The whispers in the hallway at school hadn't stopped. Her classmates still gave her side-eye whenever they passed her in the halls. Her reputation was far from fixed. As much as her father's words had comforted her, Jasmine knew there was more to it than just accepting the truth. There was a long road ahead, and it was going to take more than just clearing her name. She had to prove herself, not just to everyone around her, but to herself as well. Jazz, you okay? Her dad's voice broke through her thoughts. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her, but she hadn't touched it. Her mind was still racing, filled with questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. She looked up at him, forcing a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about stuff. He raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. What kind of stuff? Jasmine hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I don't know. Everything. The way people look at me. The way they talk about me behind my back. I know the truth now, but how do I make them see it? How do I make them understand that I'm not what they think I am? Her father sat down across from her, his expression softening. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Jazz. Not to me, and not to them. The truth is the truth, whether they see it or not. What's important is that you know who you are. Jasmine shook her head. It's not that simple, Dad. People don't just let things go. They hold on to their judgments, their opinions. And I don't want to be the person they think I am. I don't want to carry this label forever. Her dad sighed deeply and put a hand on hers. I know it's hard, baby. But you can't change how they think. You can only change how you respond. And you have to let go of that weight. Don't let their opinions define you. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to absorb his words. It wasn't easy. She'd spent so much of her life caring about what others thought. But she had to start somewhere. It had to begin with her. I'll try, she said quietly. Later that day, Jasmine walked into school with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of determination. The hallway felt like a minefield, with every step she took filled with the fear of running into one of the people who had believed the worst about her. She could feel the eyes on her, hear the hushed whispers as she passed by. But this time, something was different. The weight of the past few weeks, the uncertainty, the self-doubt, it was still there, but it was starting to shift. She wasn't going to let the whispers consume her anymore. Her first class was English. As she walked in, she saw Sarah, her best friend, sitting in the back of the room, waving her over. Sarah's face lit up when she saw her, and for the first time in days, Jasmine felt a little bit of that old comfort. "Hey, you," Sarah said, giving her a hug. "I'm so glad you're here. How are you feeling?" "Really?" Jasmine shrugged, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I'm better. Not perfect. But better. The video, it helped. But there's still a lot I have to figure out." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "I get it. But you're not alone, Jasmine. I've got your back. Always. You just let me know what you need, okay?" Jasmine's throat tightened, and for a moment, she didn't trust herself to speak. She had spent so much time feeling isolated, but hearing those words from Sarah made something inside her crack open. She wasn't alone anymore. "I'll be okay," Jasmine said, the words sounding more like a promise than a statement. "It's just going to take some time." The bell rang, and class started, but Jasmine's mind wasn't on the lesson. Her thoughts drifted back to the video. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone." It was a hard truth to swallow. She had spent so much of her life trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to make everyone happy. But the truth was, no matter how hard she tried, there would always be someone who didn't believe in her. Someone who would doubt her, question her, or accuse her of things she didn't do. The only person she needed to prove anything to was herself. Jasmine had always been enough. She always had been. The rest of the day went by in a blur. She couldn't avoid the stares, the whispers, but she could walk with her head held high. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Every time she spoke, every time she smiled, it felt like she was regaining a little more of herself. By the end of the day, as she walked to the bus, Jasmine realized that the world hadn't crumbled because of the accusations. It hadn't ended. But it was going to take more than just a few good days to rebuild everything. The damage had been done, and it was going to take time to heal. And yet, somehow, she felt stronger. Maybe it was the way Sarah had supported her. Maybe it was the truth in the video. But whatever it was, Jasmine knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let this break her. The road to redemption wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to walk it. As she sat down on the bus, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her dad. "Remember, you are loved, and you are enough. Don't forget that." Jasmine smiled, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a blanket. It was a small thing, but it was the reassurance she needed. She wasn't alone. She wasn't defined by their judgment. She was still Jasmine. Strong, capable, and worthy of a future that wasn't clouded by lies. And this was just the beginning. Jasmine woke up with a newfound sense of purpose. Her dad's message from the night before still lingered in her mind, "You are loved, and you are enough." It wasn't just words. It was a reminder. A reminder that she had the power to change her path, to stop letting the hurtful things others said define her. Today would be different. Today, she would take the first steps in not just healing herself, but also showing the world the truth. She had spent too long being afraid of what people thought of her, letting their words and actions cloud her sense of self. But she wasn't going to stay hidden in the shadows anymore. She wasn't going to let the lies control her. The day ahead felt like a fresh start, and she was determined to embrace it. As she stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her uniform for school, she took a long look at her reflection. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could actually face herself. Not just the version of her who was burdened by the accusations, but the one who was strong enough to stand up for herself, the one who knew who she was deep down. Her phone buzzed as she reached for her bag. It was a message from Sarah. "Good luck today. I'm with you, no matter what happens. You've got this flexed biceps." Jasmine smiled and quickly typed back a reply. "Thanks, I'll be okay. Just trying to move forward." The bus ride was quieter than usual. The usual chatter and laughter among her peers had been replaced by uncomfortable silences. The weight of the previous week still hung over them, but Jasmine felt lighter now. She wasn't afraid of the whispers anymore. Not today. Today, she had something stronger than fear, determination. As she entered the school building, she could feel the eyes following her. Some faces were curious, some were judgmental, but there was no longer any shame in her heart. She was holding her head high, walking with a confidence that surprised even her. Her first class was English, and when she walked in, she was met with a mix of stares and whispers. But Sarah was already there, waiting for her. She gave her friend a small nod of encouragement, and for the first time since all of this started, Jasmine felt like she wasn't just walking through life alone. "Jasmine, can we talk?" Mr. Harper, the teacher, called out as he spotted her walking in. She stopped and turned to face him, unsure of what to expect. "Sure, Mr. Harper." "What's up?" she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just wanted to let you know that I believe you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "And I'm sorry for what happened. I know it hasn't been easy for you." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, especially not from a teacher. Mr. Harper had always been supportive, but this? This was more than she could have hoped for. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost catching in her throat. "It means a lot to me." "You're welcome," he replied. "Just remember, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Jasmine nodded, grateful for his kindness. She hadn't expected to feel this supported today, but it was a small step in the right direction. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was beginning to turn. As she settled into her seat, Sarah leaned over and whispered, "See? You're already starting to change things. People are noticing." Jasmine smiled, but her mind was already elsewhere. Mr. Harper's words had given her a boost, but there was still so much to do. The truth had come out, but it wasn't enough for people to simply know it. They had to believe it. She had to show them that she wasn't the person they thought she was. She had to show them who she really was. The rest of the day passed in a blur of lessons and whispered conversations, but Jasmine remained focused. Every time someone looked at her, every time she felt that flicker of doubt creep into her mind, she reminded herself of one thing: the truth was on her side. At lunch, she sat with Sarah and a few other friends, most of whom had been by her side throughout the whole ordeal. There were a few unfamiliar faces at the table, but the energy was lighter now. The tension that had once filled the air seemed to have eased, just a little. "I can't believe how different things are today," Jasmine said, breaking the silence. "People are actually talking to me like nothing happened." Sarah grinned. "That's because they're realizing the truth. It's going to take time, but you're getting there." "I know it." Jasmine nodded, her thoughts drifting for a moment. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. Some people would never change their opinions, but she was ready to face that. She didn't need to change their minds. She needed to change hers. She needed to prove to herself that she was enough, no matter what others thought. That evening, as she was finishing her homework, her phone buzzed with another message from her dad. "I'm proud of you, Jazz, keep your chin up. Tomorrow is a new day, and you're one step closer to where you need to be." Her heart swelled with love as she typed back a quick response. "Thanks, Dad. I'm getting there." The words from her father always felt like a lifeline. They reminded her that, no matter what happened, she had a family who believed in her. And for the first time, she was starting to believe in herself, too. As the night drew to a close, Jasmine sat by the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering in the distance. She thought about all that had happened, how much had changed in such a short time. She had been accused, judged, and misunderstood, but now she was standing on the edge of something new. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. But she also knew that she was no longer the same girl who had walked into this storm. She had grown. She had learned. And she was ready to face whatever came next. With a deep breath, she turned away from the window and got ready for bed. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to move forward. And this time, Jasmine wasn't afraid of what the future held. She was ready. The next morning, Jasmine woke up with a strange sense of anticipation in her chest. Her alarm blared loudly, pulling her out of sleep, but instead of the usual dread she had felt recently, today she felt ready. The heavy weight that had suffocated her for weeks seemed to have lifted just a little, like a fog finally starting to clear. She glanced at the clock, realizing she was running late. Quickly, she scrambled to get dressed, tossing on her school uniform with more urgency than usual. Today, however, her movements were different, faster, more purposeful. She wasn't running away from anything anymore. She was running toward something. As she pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail, she noticed a familiar message pop up on her phone. It was from her dad. "Today's another chance. Make it count. I'm proud of you." Jasmine smiled to herself as she stuffed her phone into her bag. Her dad's words were always the steady hand on her shoulder, even when life felt out of control. It gave her the strength she needed to keep moving forward. At the breakfast table, her mom didn't ask how she was feeling, but Jasmine could tell her mother had been following the news surrounding her. She had seen the same thing everyone else had, the rumors, the accusations, the whispers. But her mom said nothing, giving Jasmine the space she needed to find her own voice. It was a quiet support, one that didn't need words. And that was enough for Jasmine today. As she arrived at school, she couldn't help but notice how the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't a complete change, but the weight of the whispers seemed lighter. There were still people who looked at her with judgment in their eyes, but there were also those who now looked at her with sympathy. A few of her classmates even nodded at her in passing. Small gestures, but gestures that meant everything. When she reached her locker, she found Sarah already waiting for her, her face lighting up at the sight of Jasmine. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, leaning against the lockers. "I'm okay," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "Today feels different." "You're going to be okay," Sarah reassured her. "You know we're all behind you." Jasmine smiled. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, she had felt completely isolated, with the weight of everything threatening to pull her under. Now, she felt like she was beginning to find her footing again. As they walked to their first class together, Jasmine caught sight of a familiar face, Ethan, a classmate from a few years ago. He wasn't part of her circle of friends, but they had always been on good terms. Their eyes met, and Jasmine felt her stomach churn with nerves. She hadn't spoken to him since the accusations began. Ethan paused for a moment, then walked over to her with a serious look on his face. For a moment, Jasmine braced herself for another round of judgment, but then he spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "Jasmine, I just wanted to apologize," he said, his gaze steady. "I didn't believe you at first, and I'm sorry for that. I know that wasn't right." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She had expected more hostility, not an apology. But his sincerity was clear, and it took her a moment to process his words. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice calm, but with an undercurrent of emotion. "It means a lot that you're saying this." He nodded. "I'm sorry for not being there for you when you needed it. I won't make that mistake again." With that, he gave her a brief nod before walking off to his class. Jasmine stood there, processing what had just happened. In a strange way, it felt like another small victory. She wasn't expecting everyone to suddenly accept her, but the fact that someone like Ethan had come forward and apologized made her feel like the tide was truly beginning to change. The rest of the day went by in a blur of classes and conversations. But there was one moment in particular that stuck with Jasmine. After lunch, as she was walking through the hallway, she noticed a group of students gathered around a small screen. Curiosity piqued, she walked over to see what was going on. To her surprise, it was a video, a security footage clip, to be specific. And the face on the screen? Her father's. Jasmine's stomach dropped. The footage wasn't recent, but it showed her father speaking to the store manager on the night of the incident. She recognized the footage immediately. It was the same night she had been accused of stealing. The video had been circulating, but the angle it showed was different from the one that had been shown at the school earlier. This one, from the camera inside the store, showed her father approaching the manager, his voice calm but firm. She could barely make out the words, but it was clear that he was defending her, standing up for her when everyone else was against her. "Is that your dad?" Sarah asked quietly, stepping up beside her. Jasmine nodded, her heart racing. It was the first time she had seen the footage from this perspective. Her dad's words, though not audible, were loud in their silence. It was as if he was speaking directly to her, telling her that he would always have her back, no matter what. For a moment, Jasmine just stood there, unable to look away. The video wasn't new, it was just now circulating among the students. But somehow, seeing her dad in that light, standing up for her in front of everyone, felt like a revelation. It was as if the entire school was being shown the truth for the first time. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, but Jasmine didn't immediately move. She felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief wash over her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The truth had finally made its way to the right people. As they walked to their next class, Jasmine's thoughts raced. She had no idea who had leaked the footage, but it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out there now, and she had the proof she needed. Her dad's actions spoke louder than any accusation ever could. In class, Jasmine's mind was focused, her body on autopilot. She knew that things wouldn't be perfect. There would still be people who doubted her, still be whispers behind her back. But today, she had seen a glimpse of what was possible. She had seen the truth start to change things. By the time the school day ended, Jasmine felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in weeks. She had faced the storm and made it through. But more importantly, she had learned something valuable. The truth, no matter how long it takes, has a way of finding its way to the surface. And no matter what came next, Jasmine was ready for it. The following morning, Jasmine woke up with a sense of unfamiliarity hanging in the air. The weight that had plagued her for weeks had lifted somewhat, but the real work was only just beginning. She had gotten a glimpse of the truth, but now it was time for her to face what came next. With the school buzzing over the security footage and her father's defense of her, everything was about to change, but was she truly ready for it? As she walked into the kitchen, her mother was already there, a cup of coffee in hand, sitting quietly. Jasmine could tell that her mom was still processing everything, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Morning," Jasmine said softly, pouring herself a bowl of cereal. Her mother gave a small nod, watching her with an intensity that made Jasmine feel exposed. There was a moment of silence between them before her mom spoke. "I saw the footage," her mom said, her voice soft but firm. Jasmine nodded, her spoon clinking against the bowl. "Yeah, so did everyone else. Her mom set her coffee down and looked at her with something like pride. Your father, he's always been your biggest supporter. It's clear to me now that he was right all along. Jasmine could hear the unsaid words in her mother's tone. It was a strange comfort, hearing the acknowledgement of her father's faith in her. For so long, Jasmine had wondered whether her parents would ever stand by her, especially as the rumors mounted. But now, everything seemed clearer. Her dad had fought for her in ways she hadn't even realized. He had believed her when no one else did. I feel like everything's changing, Jasmine said, the weight of the words sinking in. It is, her mom replied gently. But you've got to make sure you're ready for what comes next. People are going to keep talking. They always do. But you can't let them control you. You need to stand tall now. Jasmine wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of responsibility. But her mom's words stuck with her, echoing in her head as she went through the motions of getting ready for school. She was no longer just the girl everyone thought was guilty. She was the girl who had stood up, the girl who had fought for her truth, and the girl who had a family that believed in her. When Jasmine arrived at school, the atmosphere felt different, and yet, not entirely. The whispers still lingered, but there was a sense of anticipation now. Everyone knew what had happened with the footage. They knew her father had been the one to stand up and defend her. But even as the truth circulated, Jasmine couldn't escape the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger than she had anticipated. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, and Jasmine felt a rush of nerves wash over her. As she walked to her locker, she saw a familiar face ahead, Ms. Collins, the school counselor. Jasmine, can I talk to you for a moment? Ms. Collins called out, a slight concern in her voice. Jasmine hesitated but nodded. She had always felt a connection to Ms. Collins, especially since she had been the first person to reach out when everything started to unravel. Her teacher had believed in her when no one else did, and that made her a safe person to talk to. Ms. Collins led her to the nearby counseling office, a quiet space filled with soft lighting and calming colors. I just wanted to check in with you, Ms. Collins said, sitting down. You're handling everything so well, Jasmine. I know it's been difficult. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I'm not sure if I'm handling it. I'm just trying to keep going. Ms. Collins smiled gently. That's all you can do. But remember, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. This has been a lot for you, and it's not over. People are still processing everything. Not everyone will believe the truth, but I want you to remember that you have something a lot of people don't. What's that? Jasmine asked, her voice quieter now. You have strength, Ms. Collins replied, her eyes meeting Jasmine's. You fought for yourself, and that's something worth holding on to. I believe in you. Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down, nodding. Thank you. I don't know if I believe in myself yet, but I'm trying. That's all you can do, Ms. Collins said, giving her a warm smile. And don't forget, you don't have to do it alone. As Jasmine left the counselor's office, she felt a sense of reassurance, as though a weight had been lifted just a little more. She wasn't entirely sure where things would go from here, but she knew she wasn't alone. People like Ms. Collins, and Sarah, and her dad, were in her corner. That was enough for now. The day dragged on, each class more of a blur than the last. But it wasn't the lessons that kept her attention, it was the whispers, the glances, and the undercurrents of tension in the halls. She could feel the weight of the truth hanging over her, but it was a different kind of weight now. It wasn't a burden she had to carry alone anymore. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Jasmine felt exhausted, emotionally drained from trying to carry so many conflicting feelings. But as she packed her bag, a voice called out to her from across the room. Jasmine! Wait up! It was Ethan. Jasmine stopped, her heart skipping a beat. The last time they had spoken, it had been an apology. This time, he looked different, more confident, more at ease. "Hey, I just wanted to say. I'm glad you're here," he said, his expression sincere. "I've seen a lot of people talking, and I just want you to know that I'm with you. I always have been." Jasmine hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. But as she looked at him, she realized that despite everything, despite the way the school had reacted and the accusations that had followed her, she wasn't alone anymore. Ethan's words, small as they were, meant something. "Thank you," Jasmine said softly, her voice steady. "I really appreciate it." He nodded. "I know it's been hard, but you're stronger than you think." As they walked out of the school building together, the weight of the day slowly began to ease off Jasmine's shoulders. She wasn't completely sure what the future held, but she was starting to believe that she could handle whatever came next. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was moving towards something, not running away from it. The days following Jasmine's revelation felt surreal. She had anticipated some backlash, but the reality of navigating the aftermath was more intense than she had imagined. She could feel the eyes on her everywhere she went, in the hallways, at lunch, even during class. The school had a buzz to it now, but it wasn't the kind of buzz that was flattering. It was a low hum of gossip, whispers, and murmurs that followed her every step. As much as she tried to block it out, it was impossible to ignore the way people looked at her now. Some faces were sympathetic, while others were filled with judgment. It wasn't the entire school, but it felt like it sometimes. Jasmine couldn't help but wonder if she would ever be seen for more than what had happened. Could she still be herself, or had the truth permanently changed how she was perceived? Walking through the school courtyard during lunch, Jasmine felt a knot form in her stomach. She noticed Sarah sitting with her usual group of friends, and for a moment, Jasmine hesitated. She hadn't had a real conversation with Sarah since the day her dad had revealed the footage. The distance between them had grown without either of them intending for it to happen. Jasmine found herself suddenly unsure of the relationship, unsure of how to bridge the gap. But Sarah spotted her and waved her over, an invitation Jasmine couldn't resist. As she walked toward the table, her steps felt heavier than usual, but the familiar warmth of her friend's smile grounded her. "Hey," Sarah said, patting the seat next to her. "Come sit. I need to talk to you." Jasmine smiled weakly and sat down. She could feel the weight of her friend's gaze, full of curiosity and concern. "I've been hearing things," Sarah began, her voice low, "and I just want you to know. I'm proud of you for standing up like you did." Jasmine nodded but didn't say anything at first. Her mouth felt dry, and she didn't know how to respond. The words Sarah had just spoken were almost too much to take in. Proud of her? She had no idea if anyone would be proud of her. All she had done was fight for the truth. How could that be something to be proud of? Sarah seemed to sense the hesitation and pressed on. "I know it's been hard. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to have everyone talk about you like that. But you know, some of the things people are saying, they don't even know what they're talking about. You're still the same person." The sincerity in Sarah's words hit Jasmine like a wave. The support, the understanding, it felt like a balm to her soul, but there was a darker thought creeping into her mind: what about the rest of the school? What about the people who would never believe her? The ones who saw her as the guilty party no matter what? "I just feel like it's not over," Jasmine finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even after the footage, people still think I did something wrong." Sarah gave her a look that was both empathetic and firm. "Jasmine, people are always going to talk. There's always going to be someone who doesn't get it. You've got to focus on the ones who do. Like me. And your dad. And, well, most of your family." Jasmine swallowed hard, trying to push back the lump forming in her throat. "But what about everyone else? What about the ones who still think I'm lying? The ones who won't look at me the same?" "They're not important," Sarah said, her tone resolute. "What matters is that you know the truth. What matters is the people who support you. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Jasmine nodded, but her thoughts were swirling. She appreciated Sarah's words, she truly did. But the truth was that it wasn't as easy as just ignoring the noise. She was still the same person, but it was hard to ignore the fact that people saw her differently now. Later that afternoon, as Jasmine made her way to her final class of the day, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out to check the message, and her heart dropped when she saw the name at the top of the screen. Dad. She unlocked the phone, and the text message appeared in front of her. We need to talk when you get home. It's important. Jasmine felt a pit form in her stomach. Her father had been her greatest ally in this storm, and if he was asking to talk, it must be serious. She had no idea what it could be about. The footage had already done its job. The truth was out. Was something else about to come to light? She shoved the phone back into her pocket and walked into class, her mind racing. The final bell rang, and Jasmine rushed home, her thoughts spinning with questions. When she opened the front door, the house was eerily quiet. Her mom was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, but her dad wasn't in sight. Hey, where's Dad? Jasmine asked, her voice slightly breathless. Her mother turned around, giving her a soft smile. He's in the study, waiting for you. He said it's about the school. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. The school? Her dad had been active in helping clear her name, but what could this be about? She walked slowly toward the study, her feet dragging as uncertainty settled in her chest. When she opened the door, her dad was sitting at his desk, a pile of papers in front of him. He looked up and gave her a warm smile, though his eyes were tinged with concern. Hey, kiddo, he said, his voice gentle. We need to talk. Jasmine sat down across from him, bracing herself for whatever was coming. Your mom and I have been talking, her dad continued, his hands clasped together on the desk. And there's something we need to prepare for. There are some people from the school who want to meet with you. Jasmine's brow furrowed. What kind of people? The school board, her dad said, his tone turning serious. They want to discuss the incident. You've been through a lot, and we need to be ready for what's next. Jasmine's stomach dropped. Wait, what do you mean, what's next? He sighed. There are some things we need to prepare for. Not everyone is convinced about what happened. Some people are questioning the footage, questioning your innocence. They're not happy about the way it was handled. We might need to take further action. Jasmine felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. You mean, they might try to punish me for something I didn't do? Her dad's eyes softened, and he reached across the desk to take her hand. I'm not going to let that happen, Jasmine. We've got your back. But we need to be prepared. It's going to take everything we've got to make sure the truth sticks. Jasmine sat back, trying to process the weight of his words. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following days felt like an endless loop of anxiety. Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how much she tried to move forward, the weight of the situation was always lurking just behind her. As much as her dad had assured her they would fight for her, Jasmine wasn't sure she was ready for the storm that seemed to be on the horizon. Her confidence had begun to crack as she realized the fight was bigger than her, it involved the very system that was supposed to protect her. Jasmine sat in her room, looking out of the window. The evening sky had just begun to darken, and the city was quiet, but inside her mind, it was anything but. The school board meeting her father had mentioned loomed over her like a storm cloud. The school board was supposed to represent fairness, but Jasmine knew that wasn't always the case. She couldn't forget the faces of the people who had called her a liar, the whispers that followed her wherever she went. The fight wasn't just about proving her innocence anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity, and more importantly, her voice. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. She quickly opened it. Sarah, hey, I've been thinking about everything that's been going on. Are you okay? Jasmine paused before replying. She didn't want to seem like she was falling apart, but the truth was, she wasn't okay. She had to put on a brave face every day, but sometimes, the weight of it all became too much. Still, she typed back as best as she could. Jasmine, I'm hanging in there. Just trying to wrap my head around everything. How are you? Sarah, I'm good. But listen, I was talking to some people from the school, and they're all wondering about what happened after the footage came out. People still aren't buying it, Jasmine. It's like they don't believe it was real. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. She'd been hearing the same thing from her dad. Some people were questioning the footage, and others were pretending like it had never been there at all. It made her wonder, why was it so hard for some people to accept the truth? Jasmine, I don't know what to do. I keep hoping it'll all just blow over, but it's not. The school board wants to meet with me. I'm so scared they'll find a way to blame me. Sarah, don't be scared. You're not alone in this. You've got me, and you've got your dad. You've got the truth on your side. They can't take that away from you. Jasmine smiled softly at Sarah's message. It was the kind of reassurance she needed, but it didn't make the situation any less daunting. The following morning, the sun was barely up, but Jasmine had already been awake for hours. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the upcoming meeting. She couldn't help but think about how much had changed in the past few weeks. She had gone from being a normal high school senior to someone caught in the middle of a battle for her own reputation. When she finally dragged herself out of bed and into the kitchen, her dad was already there, sipping his coffee. His face looked more serious than usual, the lines of worry etched deeper than before. He looked up when Jasmine entered, offering her a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, kiddo," he said, trying to sound casual, but there was an underlying tension in his voice. "Morning," Jasmine replied, her voice quiet as she sat down across from him. Her dad placed his cup down and leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern. "Listen, I know you're probably feeling a lot of pressure right now. The meeting with the school board is important, and it might get tough, but I need you to stay strong. Remember, we've got the truth on our side." Jasmine nodded but didn't say anything. The truth had to be enough, right? But how could she trust the system that had already failed her? How could she be sure that they would see the truth for what it was, not as a complication to be swept under the rug? "Do you think they'll believe me?" Jasmine finally asked, her voice small. Her dad sighed, his hand moving to rest on hers. "I don't know, Jasmine. But I do know one thing, you deserve to be heard. And if they can't see that, if they can't see you for who you are, then we'll keep fighting." Jasmine swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump in her throat. She didn't know if she had the strength to fight anymore. Every day felt like an uphill battle, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending everything was okay. Later that afternoon, the reality of the situation became even more pressing. Jasmine and her dad arrived at the school board meeting, and as soon as they walked through the doors, she could feel the tension in the air. The board members were seated at a long table at the front of the room, their faces serious, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest as she was led to a seat at the center of the room. One by one, the board members introduced themselves, their voices formal, detached. Jasmine felt like she was a specimen being examined under a microscope. There was no warmth in their eyes, only professionalism, as if they had already made up their minds before she even walked in. "Jasmine, we understand you've come here today to address the incident involving the theft allegations," one of the board members said, a woman in her late 40s with a stern expression. "We've reviewed the footage, but we still have some concerns about how things were handled. We'd like to hear your side of the story." Jasmine's heart raced. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. She could feel her palms growing clammy, but she took a deep breath and steadied herself. I didn't steal anything, she said, her voice clear but shaky. I don't know why I was blamed, but I swear I didn't do it. The footage, it proves I didn't. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. But that doesn't make me guilty. The woman nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. We've seen the footage, but there are still questions. People are still skeptical. What can you tell us to ease those concerns? Jasmine swallowed hard, struggling to keep her composure. How could she make them understand? How could she make them see her as a person and not just a problem to be solved? I can't change what people think, Jasmine said, her voice quieter now. But I can stand here and tell you the truth. I didn't do it. And I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't do. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The woman at the head of the table leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she considered Jasmine's response. We'll take your statement into account, the woman said finally, though her voice lacked any true empathy. But this matter isn't over yet. We'll be in touch. Jasmine's dad stood up beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He gave a curt nod to the board members and guided Jasmine out of the room. As they stepped into the hallway, Jasmine felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The meeting had been as cold and impersonal as she had feared. The board members had barely listened to her, let alone believed her. They were still questioning the truth, still doubting her. Her dad squeezed her shoulder gently. It's not over, Jasmine. Not by a long shot. But in that moment, Jasmine wasn't so sure. The truth wasn't enough. Would it ever be? The days that followed the school board meeting felt like a blur for Jasmine. Each morning she would wake up with the heavy realization that the battle wasn't over, far from it. There was still so much to prove, and with each passing day, her resolve was beginning to crack. The weight of the world felt too heavy on her shoulders, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending everything was okay. Despite her father's endless support and the occasional kind words from Sarah, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. At school, it seemed like everyone was either indifferent or still whispering behind her back. There were a few students who stood by her side. Sarah was still her rock, always texting her with words of encouragement, but even Sarah couldn't shield Jasmine from the judgmental stares. Her every move felt under scrutiny, like she was walking around with a scarlet letter pinned to her chest. Jasmine walked through the hallways of her school, her footsteps slow and deliberate. She tried not to look at the faces around her, though she could feel the eyes on her, could hear the hushed whispers and muffled giggles. She had never been a stranger to the way people looked at her. Being a black girl at a predominantly white school had always come with its share of challenges, but this felt different. Now, it was as if the entire school had a single question on their minds: did she really steal it? She found herself walking toward the restroom when she saw the familiar face of her former best friend, Lisa, talking to a group of girls near the lockers. The group instantly fell silent when they saw Jasmine, and the awkwardness in the air was palpable. Jasmine knew what was coming before it even happened. Lisa glanced at her and shook her head, the corner of her mouth curling into a dismissive smile. "Still pretending you're innocent, huh?" she muttered, loud enough for the others to hear. "Guess we all know how this story ends." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure why it hurt so much to hear Lisa, someone she had considered her best friend, say those words. Was it the betrayal? The fact that Lisa had once been someone she trusted completely, and now, she was just another voice in the crowd that doubted her? Or was it because Jasmine had always defended Lisa, even when people said things about her? Tears stung the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "No, I'm stronger than this." She thought of her dad, how hard he had fought for her, and how Sarah had kept her grounded. She couldn't let this break her. "Why don't you just leave me alone?" Jasmine finally snapped, her voice shaking but determined. "You don't know me, and you don't know the truth. So stop talking about things you don't understand." There was a long silence before Lisa spoke again, her voice dripping with condescension. You think you're special, don't you? You think you can just act like nothing happened? Well, guess what? No one is buying your little story. They all saw you on that footage. Jasmine clenched her fists, feeling the heat rise in her chest. Her heart pounded in her ears, and for a split second, she felt like everything was closing in on her. She wanted to shout, to scream, to demand that everyone believe her, but instead, she took a deep breath and turned away. She wasn't going to let Lisa drag her into this any longer. She had learned enough about people in the past few weeks to know that sometimes, the best way to fight back was to stay silent. As Jasmine made her way to the restroom, the weight of Lisa's words lingered in the air like a toxic cloud. Inside, she locked herself in one of the stalls, leaning against the door as the tears finally came. Why is it so hard to make them understand? She thought to herself. She wiped at her eyes furiously, trying to push away the vulnerability. Why won't anyone listen to me? The sound of the door opening startled her. A few moments later, she heard Sarah's voice. Jasmine? Are you in here? Jasmine sniffed and wiped her face again, trying to compose herself. Yeah, I'm here. The stall door creaked as Sarah entered, her footsteps light as she stood next to Jasmine. Are you okay? Jasmine didn't answer right away. Her head dropped, and she couldn't bring herself to look at her friend. How could she explain the storm of emotions swirling inside her? How could she put into words how deeply this situation had cut her? I just don't get it, Sarah, she whispered. No one believes me. Not even my best friend. I feel like I'm losing everything. Sarah didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her. After a few moments, she finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. Jasmine, you're not losing everything. You're not losing yourself. You've got people who care about you. I care about you. Your dad cares about you. And the truth is on your side, whether they believe it or not. Jasmine took in a shaky breath, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. She knew Sarah was right. But still, the hurt gnawed at her. Why was this happening? She had always prided herself on being someone who stayed true to herself, someone who fought for what was right. But now, she felt like she was fighting against the world, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up the fight. How do you keep going when everything feels so broken? Jasmine asked quietly, almost as if she was asking herself more than Sarah. Sarah's voice was gentle. You keep going because you have to. You keep going because people who love you are counting on you. You keep going because you deserve to live your life, and no one gets to take that from you. Jasmine felt a spark of something deep within her, a flicker of hope. She wasn't sure if it was enough to make her feel strong again, but it was something. Something to hold on to. The bathroom door opened again, and Jasmine looked up, expecting to see another student. But it wasn't a student. It was Mr. Dawson, her favorite teacher, who had always been kind and supportive. He stood at the entrance, his expression a mix of concern and compassion. I thought I heard voices, Mr. Dawson said, his tone kind but serious. Jasmine, I don't know what's going on, but I can't help but notice how you've been struggling lately. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, if you need someone to talk to. Jasmine looked at him, surprised by the genuine kindness in his eyes. Maybe there were still people who cared, people who were willing to listen. She hadn't expected this from him, but it meant more than words could say. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mr. Dawson gave her a soft smile and nodded. You're not alone in this, Jasmine. Don't forget that. As he left the restroom, Jasmine felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't alone, after all. It might not be easy, and she might not have all the answers yet, but she had people who cared about her. And for the first time in a while, she felt the faintest spark of hope flicker inside her. She wasn't going to give up. Not yet. Not ever. The days after Jasmine's emotional breakdown in the bathroom felt like a turning point. She had cried, she had doubted herself, and she had almost given in to the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. But then, something inside her began to shift. The spark of hope Sarah had given her, along with the support of her father and Mr. Dawson, lit a fire inside her. She realized she couldn't just let this injustice define her. She had to fight. She had to show everyone the truth. Jasmine didn't have the answers yet, but she had learned something valuable in the past few days. She couldn't face this battle alone. She needed the people who cared about her to help her, and she needed to take action. There was still the issue of the footage, the infamous security footage that had been used to accuse her. The footage was the source of all the doubt, the whispers, and the judgment. If only she could get a hold of it and prove that she wasn't the one who took the money. Her first step was to talk to her dad. She knew that he was already working tirelessly behind the scenes, but Jasmine was ready to be more involved. She needed to do more than just stand by and hope the truth would eventually come out. She needed to take charge of her own destiny. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the kitchen, where her dad was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. The lines on his face were deeper now, the stress of fighting for his daughter taking its toll. But even with the exhaustion, there was a determination in his eyes, a fire that matched her own. "Dad," Jasmine said, taking a seat across from him. "I want to help. I can't just sit here anymore and wait for the truth to come out. We need that footage. We need to prove it wasn't me." Her father paused, looking at her for a long moment. Then, his face softened. "I know you're scared, Jasmine. And I know how hard this is. But we're doing everything we can. The school's been tight-lipped about the footage, but I've got a couple of people I'm talking to. You don't need to carry this burden alone." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not alone. But I have to be involved. I can't keep waiting. I need to see it for myself, Dad. If I'm innocent, then I should have the chance to prove it. And I know we have the right to see it." Her father sighed but then nodded. "Okay, we'll push harder. I'll contact the school again today, but if they refuse to cooperate, we may have to take further action." "Are you ready for that?" Jasmine's heart raced. She had never imagined she'd be involved in something like this. The thought of taking legal action was both thrilling and terrifying. But it was the only option she had left. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I don't care what it takes, Dad. We'll get that footage." Later that day, Jasmine's father reached out to the school administration once again, this time demanding to see the footage. The school's response was predictably slow. They wanted to drag their feet, hoping the situation would resolve on its own. But Jasmine's dad wasn't going to back down. He was relentless, speaking to the principal, the head of security, and even the school's legal team. By the end of the week, they finally agreed to show him the footage, under the condition that Jasmine's father sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to distribute the video. This was a small victory, but it was enough. Jasmine's dad brought the footage home, and she sat next to him in their living room, both of them staring at the small laptop screen. The video footage was grainy, but it was clear enough to see what had happened. Jasmine held her breath as the scene unfolded. There she was, in the footage, walking past the table where the money was left. But there was something off about the way it was captured. The angle wasn't right. It wasn't from a direct viewpoint, and the clarity was poor, just enough to make it seem as though Jasmine was reaching for the money. But Jasmine knew it wasn't true. She hadn't stolen anything. The way the video was framed made it look like she was guilty, but she wasn't. "Pause it, Dad," Jasmine said, her voice trembling. She pointed at the screen where a blurry figure, not quite her, appeared to be near the table. "That's not even me. Look at the angle. Whoever filmed this didn't get the full picture. It's not clear enough." Her father squinted at the screen, his brow furrowed. "You're right. It's too blurry to be conclusive. But we can't just stop here. We need to prove what happened before and after this shot. Jasmine's pulse quickened as she processed the implications. If the footage was shaky and unclear, then why had the school taken it as definitive proof of her guilt? Why hadn't they questioned its authenticity? Was this just another part of the system trying to make an example of her? She had always known that the world wasn't fair, but seeing how easily her entire reputation could be shattered because of one piece of unclear footage made her blood boil. We need to find out who else was around the table, Jasmine said suddenly, sitting up straighter. We need to see if anyone else was close enough to have taken the money. There could be something here that they're not showing us. Her father's eyes lit up. That's a good idea. If we can find more footage, wider angles, other cameras, we might be able to pinpoint who was actually near the table and make the case stronger. We need to get access to all of it. Jasmine felt a surge of hope. They were on the right track. This wasn't over. The school couldn't just dismiss her like this, not when there were clear holes in the evidence. She wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next step was clear, Jasmine and her father would have to keep pushing. The truth was out there, and she was determined to uncover it, no matter how difficult it would be. As Jasmine looked at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly, she knew this was just the beginning. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had a chance. They were going to uncover the truth. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her story for her anymore. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, decisions, and moments of clarity. Jasmine and her father had made significant progress in their quest for the truth, but the journey had been long and filled with obstacles. They had faced a system that was quick to judge, a school administration that was resistant to transparency, and a community that had already made up its mind. But despite all of this, they had never given up. And now, they were on the brink of something that could change everything. The school had reluctantly agreed to grant full access to the remaining footage, and after what felt like an eternity of back and forth, Jasmine and her father had finally reviewed every possible angle. They saw the moments that had been missed in the previous footage. The parts where other students walked by the table, where shadows shifted, and where someone else, not Jasmine, had been seen lingering near the cache. Jasmine's heart raced as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The footage showed everything she had been telling them all along. It wasn't her. It had never been her. And then, in a moment that felt surreal, Jasmine's father held up a printout of the security report from the school. The name of the student who had taken the money was finally revealed. It wasn't Jasmine. It was someone else. Her father met her eyes, a look of quiet triumph in his expression. "We did it," he said, his voice low but full of relief. "The truth is out there. You've been vindicated." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For so long, she had carried the burden of being accused, of being blamed for something she didn't do. The shame, the frustration, the loneliness, it all felt like a distant memory now, fading into the past. But even though the truth had been revealed, the emotional scars would remain. They would fade, yes, but they would always be a part of her. But what mattered most was this: Jasmine had fought for herself. She had refused to back down. She had stood up to an unjust system, and in doing so, she had found her strength. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance, she was someone who had the power to change her story, to take control of her narrative, and to rise above the challenges that had threatened to define her. As Jasmine and her father walked into the principal's office to present the evidence, she felt a quiet pride swell inside her. The school had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. The principal, who had been one of the main voices pushing for her expulsion, looked uncomfortable as he reviewed the footage. His face was a study in guilt as he apologized, his words hollow and reluctant. "I'm sorry, Jasmine," he said, his eyes downcast. "We made a mistake. We should have done more to verify the facts before making any conclusions." Jasmine stood tall, her head held high. She could feel the eyes of the staff in the room on her, but she didn't flinch. "It's not enough to apologize," she said, her voice steady but firm. "This could have destroyed my future. You don't get to undo that with just an apology." Her father nodded in agreement, his arm around her shoulders in support. "Jasmine's future isn't something to be taken lightly. We've fought for her to have the chance to continue her education with dignity and respect. We expect the school to take the appropriate action." The principal hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "We will be reviewing our policies and procedures to ensure that something like this never happens again. And we'll be taking steps to rectify the harm caused to Jasmine." As they left the principal's office, Jasmine felt a sense of justice, but it was a bittersweet victory. The school had done the right thing, but the damage had already been done. The whispers, the gossip, the stares, those would linger long after the apology had been given. Still, Jasmine was determined not to let that define her. The following weeks were a mix of quiet reflection and gradual rebuilding. Jasmine had regained her place among her friends, though things weren't quite the same. Some people had apologized to her, others had remained distant, and a few were still hesitant to believe the truth. But Jasmine didn't need anyone's approval to feel validated. She had found her strength, and that was all she needed. She continued to focus on her studies, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Jasmine's passion for her future, her desire to succeed, and her need to prove to herself that she could rise above adversity all drove her forward. Sarah remained her rock, offering unwavering support throughout the ordeal. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and Jasmine knew that no matter what happened in the future, she had someone by her side who truly understood her. At home, Jasmine's relationship with her father had grown even stronger. Their conversations, once filled with uncertainty and worry, were now filled with hope and determination. Her father's belief in her, and his willingness to fight for her, had taught her the value of perseverance and resilience. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset, Jasmine turned to her father and smiled. "You know, I used to think that people would always see me for my mistakes. But now, I know that I'm more than just a mistake. I'm not what others say I am." Her father's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on hers. "You're so much more than that, Jasmine. You're strong, smart, and capable of anything. Never let anyone define you by what they think they know about you." In that moment, Jasmine realized that the journey she had been through wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about discovering who she truly was, someone who could endure, fight for what was right, and rise from the ashes stronger than ever. The truth had set her free, but it was her strength, her resilience, and her refusal to be defined by others that had made her truly powerful. She wasn't just a survivor of the past, she was a warrior for her future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jasmine knew that no matter what life threw her way, she would face it head-on, with unwavering strength and an unshakable belief in herself. And that was the most important lesson of all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?